is on reigniting the magic. Reigniting the magic. And a few of you have already mentioned this sense that you're going through some transitions in your life, some moments maybe where you're in that depression, that valley area, right? And I think this is one of the best times to reignite that magic. When I think of reigniting the magic, the first thing I actually think of, especially in that analogy of this valley that we might find ourselves in life, at moments in our lives, is to realize that everything in life is going up and down, up and down. It's the wave patterns of life, right? And if you can remember that there will be an up, then as you're on your way down, instead of resisting it, which I think is what most of us do, right? Things start to show up and we see that maybe something's going to move out of our life, or maybe something we wanted isn't really happening, or we're struggling or challenged by something we're trying to create. And so now we're kind of in that dip. And instead of going with it, allowing ourselves, surrendering into that flow, we resist, we try to control, we try to figure it out, right? And when I say going with it, it means adapting, being flexible, right? So often we find ourselves up against the wall and we're like, I got to get through the wall. All you have to do is step back for a moment. And you might notice there's a door right over there. Just step over and go through the door. But you can't do that until you relax. And so when we're going down, if you relax, then you gain a little bit of speed, which also means the valley lasts less time. And you gain the momentum for the upswing. But again, what I've noticed a lot of people do is they resist on the way down. Whenever life is not going to your plan, we tend to resist as human beings, right? It's like, I wanted it to do this. Yeah, but it's better. It doesn't matter. It was supposed to be like this. And we resisted, and in that resistance, we're putting the brakes. Then we get to the very bottom of the valley. We're down there, and we have no momentum to go back up. And that's when we're wondering, is there even magic in life? Is there even a possibility that I'm going to get out of this rut, this groove that I've made for myself? And yes, there is, but if you resist it on the way down, it might be a little bit more effort on your part to start to get yourself back going. But this is where the reigniting happens, right? Have you guys ever used these long candle lighters that you kind of like click them? And you know when you first get it, you're like, it's a like nice big flame. And then by like the third one, it's like click, 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 like nothing. And this is what happens. We get to that valley, that dip, and we're like, click, 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 ah. And we start thinking nothing's going to work. But here's what you have to do. You have to stay consistent. And that means you keep clicking until finally you get a flame. And then it stays long enough that you can get a little bit up the next slope. And then you click again until you get a little bit to the next slope. And each time you're reigniting something within you, not just this, flame of life, but you're actually reigniting possibility. You're reigniting potential. You're reigniting the significance in your own psyche, because the mind works in a beautiful way for us, right? The mind is looking for significance all the time. And whatever you make significant based on what you focus on, the mind goes, that must be for survival. So I will make sure I look for more of that significant aspect, element, object, whatever it is. And the more you consistently do that, the more it starts seeing more of those opportunities and possibilities. And that, I think, is what the magic is. There's definitely magic that's out there of energetics and things that we can't explain, and that's beyond our senses. But there's also very practical magic. And that's the practicality of intention. That's the practicality of consistency. It's the practicality of staying in one direction instead of trying to split all over the place to try different things when one thing hasn't worked at the beginning. How many of you are guilty of that? I know I am, right? You're like, I will do this, it's going to be great. It's not working. I will do this, it will be great. Right? We switch directions too often without having a trajectory that's set in the first place. I think this is one of the first things we can even do before we start to reignite magic is for what? What are we reigniting the magic for? What is our intention? Do we have a clarity of direction? Do we know where we want to go and end up? Or how we want to feel or who we want to be? These are the bigger questions. So often we're so caught up in just trying to get away from where we're at because maybe it's uncomfortable. How many have been in uncomfortable moments in your life? Right? How many are you a little bit there right now? Right? And when we find ourselves there, it's instinctual. Our biology is like, I don't like it. I want to get out of here. And so we go into avoidant patterns. We go into survival instincts. The problem with that limits possibility. It wipes away the magic. Because the mind, again, this little part of the mind, the amygdala, it's this part of the brain, it's the survival part. It's an old reptilian thing before we evolved into the frontal cortex. And that part, it's just for survival. So it only knows a few things, right? Fight, flight, freeze. And now a little bit more fawning. That's kind of like a modern day way of surviving. We just people please. Are you happy? Are you happy? Okay, good. Then I still belong. Whew, right? And we're doing this all the time because we're constantly in this place of fight or flight. Now, if you're fighting for your survival, it's like you're on the battlefield of life. Do you think you're looking around at the butterflies and the unicorns and the rainbows and you're like, look how magical this is. Oh, spear! Right? No. You're so focused on the dangers that you're not noticing the potentials and possibilities. You're so focused on what you're avoiding that you're not noticing what's being given to you, what's being presented. So the magic is always there. We don't even have to reignite it. We just have to get us to look at it. Because sometimes it's shouting at us, but we're so focused on what we don't want that we're not seeing what we do. For those of you who've come to some of my talks, you know this is a big point that I make all the time. This idea of moving our focus from what we do not want, which is often in our past, right? We're very reflective beings, and especially if we're up in the mind and not in the heart. And the heart, by the way, I mean the emotions. If you're not feeling something, but you're just analyzing, thinking, calculating, strategizing, then the only thing you can do that with is past data. Because you can't do it with the future, that's just a projection. Only your feelings and emotions can feel and sense this present moment, so your mind is always in the past. So when you're in avoidance, you're in the past. And the funny thing is, you're there trying to avoid something that you're just staring at. All you have to do is turn around, it's gone. Because your history only exists as long as you obsess on it. I'm going to say that again. Your history only exists for as long as you obsess about it. Now I know some of you might be thinking, just a second, some of you might be thinking, yeah, but your history, made you who you are. No, it didn't. It brought you to where you are. There's a difference. Your history brings you to where you are. Your choices make you who you are. Maybe there's things in our lives we don't want to abandon. We don't want to let go of. A lot of us, even the things that are harming us, we don't want to let go of. We get attached to these things. They're part of our identity and other things and the connections of our identity. The first thing I'll do is I'm going to rephrase a little bit of what you just said. Because you mentioned the idea of turning away from what you don't want. What I would suggest is turn toward what you do want. There is a difference in how that's said. Turning away, you're still focused on avoiding. And then you get into the problem that you're asking about. It's like, well, what if I don't want to avoid all of it? Like, can I filter? Can I, just these things? Like, you stay out. You're welcome, right? Instead, turn towards what you want, which might be a different dynamic with your family. See the difference? Instead of trying to just be like, oh, I don't get along with them and they're always judging me and this and that. I wish I could get away from that. The moment we do that, what we're doing is we're closing doors. And when we close the door, we close it to everything. There is no filter, unfortunately, then. But if instead we get clear about what do I actually want from that interaction, from those connections, into my future, you start to cultivate that. And a lot of times it means you don't even have to change environment or connections or interactions. You change the way you are in them, what you're expecting out of them, what you're conditioning others within them. All these different things, right? How you express within them. And all of a sudden the dynamic changes. Think of it this way. Let's say you're meeting with a friend and something's happened. Maybe you did something or they did something and there's a little awkwardness, right? And so you meet, and because you're both trying to avoid that awkwardness, what happens? It becomes more awkward, right? But if you just went and you're like, I just want to release this awkwardness, I want to come back to ease. If you were to actually focus on that, you meet up with them, hey, can we just talk about this thing so we can get it out of the way and we go back to our ease? Yeah, okay, done. But because we're trying to avoid instead, it doesn't happen. So this is what I mean by get the clarity of what you actually want. This is a really interesting thing, especially in the dynamics of relationships and interactions, whether it's family or romantic or friendships. Communication within these things often ends up being about right or wrong instead of the goal, instead of the intention. Right? I can guarantee that even in family, if family members are not agreeing with your beliefs, patterns, activities, thoughts, it's not because they just don't like you and they don't want you doing what you enjoy. It's because they don't understand it. And in their understanding of how they want to take care of you or feel love for you or express love for you or how they expect love to be, right? That's what they're expressing. And if you realize, okay, we both just want to find love for each other. We just want to find clarity, if even we use that word to be a little less strong with the idea of love, because I know sometimes that can be even tricky in relationships or in family. But clarity, that everybody just wants to find clarity. And if you get on the same team towards that, all of a sudden, you start moving towards it. But instead, what happens is people are like, I want them to hear my clarity, and I don't care about theirs. Right? And we're trying to avoid being wrong. We're trying to avoid not getting our way. We're trying to avoid not getting what we want. So we have to take a little bit of risk, and this is where the magic comes. Because, again, we think of magic not just in the practical sense, but in what we can't know, but that maybe we give some belief towards, some faith, some trust into the unknown. And that might be that if you go to somebody and you need to express something that's a bit sensitive or vulnerable and you don't know how they're going to react. And all your fears in your mind are like, oh my God, they're going to judge me and reject me and abandon me. But you don't know until you say something. And in the meantime, as long as you're just sitting with that energy, guess what? That energy is not hiding. They're feeling that, and then they're making up their own stories. And so find clarity with the magic of what you want in life. So again, we have to first figure out, how do we figure out what we want? Because it should be such an easy question, right? But I have found time and time again, I do a lot of one-on-one sessions with clients at a healing center I've got down the street. And whenever I see somebody, one of the first questions I ask, what do you want? And they'll find some clarity. They're like, you mean like today in this session? Or I'm like, in life. What do you want in life? And it really is a very simple answer that I think almost everybody would agree on, but they're stumped for a while. Because the first thing they'll do, they're like, well, what do I want? I don't know. I don't want to struggle anymore, and I don't want heartbreak, and I don't want to be ill, and I don't want to be poor, and I don't want to, ooh. Those are all the things you don't want. That's what you're avoiding. What do you want? And again, they look at me with this blank look on their face, and like, I've never really asked my brain that. There's a little steam coming out right now. And then finally they'll say something like, I don't know. And I don't believe that. Because I think every single one of us does know what we want, just we haven't recognized we have permission to have it. We haven't figured out or given ourselves the permission to have what we want. And I'm going to make it really easy, and that's why I say the answer is actually so simple. How many of you would like to be happy? Look how easy that is. What do you want? To be happy. But people are like, well, I can't just be happy. I have to do something to be happy, right? I have to go through the purgatory of all the suffering of something. I have to prove myself worthy of it. I have to work through it at something. I have to have enough money or have the love of my life or something. Then I have permission to be happy. Or even to want it. And I think this is where we stop the magic, is because we stop giving ourselves permission to just choose. To just say, you know what, that's what I want. That's the first step. At least say, that's what I want. And give yourself permission to want it. And then the second step, give yourself permission to have it. Now that doesn't mean you go and you take it from somebody else. Because I think that's what sometimes happens when we get into competition and comparison, right? We're like, oh, that person found the person that they really love and they have all that. Why can't I have that? I'm going to sabotage them. If I can't have it, they can't have it. Too many movies like that, right? What if instead we were inspired by it? You know, I'm going to ask a question here, and probably half of you will have one perspective. The other half will have a different. And you don't need to answer it out loud, but just think about it in your mind. You walk into a room, and maybe you've not been having such a great day. And you see somebody there, and they just have the biggest smile on their face, and they're just like loving life, and you know, maybe they got like a chocolate cake from Sayuri's Cafe. Now, some of you will be sitting at your corner table, sulking. You'll be like, stupid person in their happy face and their cake, and why don't I get that? Right? The other half of you have been like, you know what, they're right. I could just be happy. I'll have a cake too. Right? It's a choice. Everything that you want is going to be a choice. you have to give yourself the permission to make that choice. Nobody else will do it for you. No matter how much you prove worthy of it or work towards it, nobody else is going to be able to come and flip the switch inside of you. What tends to happen and is an illusion as if somebody else flipped the switch is that when somebody comes and shares with you something or says, hey, you can be happy, it's okay, I'm okay, whatever, something like this, then you give yourself permission. They didn't do it, but you gave yourself permission then. Just do it anyway. Give yourself permission in the very moment that you feel the desire for happiness, for joy, for freedom, for abundance, for whatever it is that you want to feel. And now when you do that, that's that click, 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 click of the little reigniter, right? The light, the flame. When you give yourself permission, you're clicking it. Now sometimes the first click, it's not just going to happen and appear. Right? Sometimes it does. It's magical. But other times it takes like 10 clicks and you're like, click, click, click. Don't let your mind get in the way. Your mind will be like, see, it's not working. It never works. Why? No. Keep going. Be consistent. Because at some point, all of a sudden, you're going to have this possibility and opportunity. Because every single one of those clicks, every single moment of permission you gave yourself to decide to be whatever and feel whatever you want to feel, you were telling your brain, look for more of this, look for more of this, look for more of this. But if you're not consistent and you add, we'll say, coins to the bank account of self-doubt and insecurity, well, that bank account's probably been growing unconsciously for a very long time. There are very strong energies over here. This one is just starting. You got to consciously keep filling it, right? And the bank loan officers over here of the doubt and insecurity, they'll come over, they'll be like, no, look, we'll give you a very low interest rate. Come on, come back over here. Don't listen. Stay focused on what you want. When you do that, and as you do that, this starts to grow, and at some point, it feels like enough. And here's the beauty of it. How many of you have struggled because you didn't feel like you were enough? This is one of those things, whenever I'm working with people, or even in my own life, when you start a self-development journey, and you start to go in, right? One of the first things that happens, you start uncovering a few layers, and then you're like, oh, shoot. And this little whisper comes up, and it's like, you're not enough. That's not going to do. You need a little bit more. You got to fix something. And here's the thing. That's also a story. You don't have to fix anything. You're perfect. It's just a story that you put on top of it. It's kind of like if you had a vase, this beautiful vase. And for so long in your life, you're like, I love my vase. I fill my vase with the most beautiful flowers. Life is so magical. And then one day while you were sleeping, somebody snuck in. They went to the vase with a marker, and they drew a little crack on it. This was maybe some influence, something that was said, some experience, something that came along and caused a little perception of a crack on your perfect vase. And you woke up in the morning, you're like, oh, I'm broken. And you start thinking the vase was useless now, not enough, not worthy. You can't put flowers in that because when you water it, it's just going to leak out. And so you stop using it, you abandon yourself, the vase. All because of the perception that something was broken, but nothing was ever broken. So the real trick is to be able to find, where did I put it? The eraser. And to be able to go to those pieces of your life that you're judging from comparison and erase the comparison. Because the moment you do that, suddenly you are enough because you're not comparing it against anything. You want to know a very, very easy way to do that? What the magical eraser is? It's a question you ask yourself. When you're asking, am I enough? Just add to it, compared to what? Am I enough compared to what? What if it's that other people aren't seeing you as being enough? Well, here's the funny thing. Nobody's ever seeing anybody as anything. They're making a choice based off their own story because they don't know you, right? They don't really know you. Most of the time, whenever somebody else is judging somebody, it's because they haven't taken the time to get to know you, to get clarity. Which means they're not acting against you. But most likely, they're acting in their own self-interest, their own self-survival and self-preservation. Again, it's a biological thing. If we're in avoidance, we're going to do that. It's hard to have a weak consciousness if you're trying to survive. So when you realize that, and let's say it's in a workplace, you know your worth, you know your work ethic, you know the results you're making, you know your intelligence and what skills you bring to the table, and you're constantly not being acknowledged, recognized, and let's say rewarded for those things, right? Why are you still there? You see, we get into that people-pleasing pattern of trying to prove so that they'll give us permission to feel like we're enough. Or we get into these side thoughts of like, yeah, but I can't just quit, or I can't let that go because I need it in order to have the money to pay for my bills and do this. Reignite the magic. Let yourself have the permission to say, you know what, I could be in a better position. I could be in a better environment. I could be in a better community and encircled by better support. I give myself permission to have that. Now, just by doing that, the workspace may even change. Just because you're interacting differently. If you're going in there every day trying to prove and coming from an energy of desperation, I'm not saying that you would be desperate, but coming from an energy of desperation, people are not going to honor your value, right? They're going to keep using you, not even maliciously. So you change the permission you give yourself of what you want. That might change the moment there, or it'll at least open your mind to see other possibilities and potentials. And it might be that some other job has already been offered to you, but you weren't noticing it. Or somebody was inviting you and was like, hey, I want to talk to you about this and that. You're like, I don't have time. I'm working really hard at this job. I'm trying to get my promotion. They just won't recognize me. Yeah, but I want to offer you. No, I don't have time. Right? And so you give yourself that time by giving yourself permission. You open your eyes to new possibilities. Yeah? There's never a moment when you are not enough. There is only moments when the perception is such. Either yours and others, but others you can't control. What you can control is how you perceive yourself and then how you show up in that regard. Great question.
More in regards to this, like let's say you go to a really fancy restaurant, they're expecting you to be some sort of guy, but you have tattoos or you look a certain way. Yeah. But, you know, or like you're going to certain places and they're looking at you like, why is this guy able to, he should be serving us instead of being here. Yeah. Well, my first question, this is great. So you're entering into environments where there's a biased view, right, of who the patron should be, who belongs. Like I'm not worthy. Yeah. So first question, let's say you're going to a fancy restaurant. Are you able to go to a fancy restaurant? Okay, so if you know that, who cares what they think, right? Because you're going to go and you're going to leave a really nice tip, and they'll be like, well, damn, I'm not going to judge that person again. Right? If you know, then act like it. But if you go in acting like you want their approval, they're going to think even less. You're feeding into their judgment and their bias. And again, it's not that people are evil because they're judging. They're misinformed. They're ignorant to the fact because most people haven't learned to ask for clarity. I'll give you two examples where this is the case, right? One of the first examples was years ago, back in San Diego. I had gone to this big furniture store, and I had just opened a healing center there. And so I had a nice budget to be working with, and I went into this big furniture store, this big pyramid-looking thing, really fancy furniture. And I walked in, and I had just come from the beach, so I had my bathing suit on, and like a t-shirt, and I walked in, and I think I even had some sand on my feet. And I swear the looks that I was getting from the customer support there, they're just like, what are you doing? And I think they literally even said, the budget furniture stores, there's a couple of them down the street. That might be more down your alley. I was like, okay, well, I had my eye on that couch, but no longer, thank you. And walked out, right? That's their loss, not mine. Flip end of that, where instead of a bias, it was actually, I was very surprised by how open the people were. Christina, my wife, and I, we were in Ojai, right? We were in Ojai, California, and we were in a camper van. We had rented it for a couple weeks, and we were just touring around the area. And as we were going around, we saw a sign, and it was a real estate sign, and it was like for this massive mansion in Ojai, which most of the properties there are already very expensive, for an open house. And we're like, why not? Let's go and just check it out. So we pull up in this camper van that's got all this graffiti across it, and it's like we're living inside this thing. We pull up and, go around the circular driveway. This is like a full circle, big fountain in the middle or something. We pull up, we stop, we get out, and we walk up towards the house, and the realtor comes out, and I'm expecting the realtor to look at us and be like, are you guys joking? You just pulled up in your tiny little mobile home. No, that's not going to happen. But no, they were the kindest, most amazing to us. They showed us everything, both wings of the house, right? We're going around looking at stuff. And it was actually the guest house when we walked out that we're like, this is nice.
But the point being, different people are going to react differently based on their history, their conditioning, and their knowledge. Don't make it your problem. Right? Own who you are and show up as such. You know, even if you've gotten your mind wrapped around it, going, okay, I know I'm worthy, I know I deserve this, I know I can have this, and you just can't take that step. Two things often happen. One of the first is we're trying to take too big of a step. Right? Very often, because if the motivation is avoidance, if you're trying to urgently get away from a certain discomfort in that moment, you try to make a grand leap to the ideal, right? From the foothill of the mountain to the summit of the mountain. And I know a lot of us are yogis, and so we have the thought we can stretch. We're like, I can do it, I swear, right? But it's much easier and much more stable to take small steps. But the problem with small steps is that the human mind has a really tough time understanding compounding effects over time. That's why we have a short attention span. That's why we want instant gratification. Because we're like, so you're telling me if I take little small steps for the next year, that maybe in a year's time I'll be out of this uncomfortable situation that I'm in or this place that I'm not really fully satisfied. No, that's too long. Give me something that tomorrow I can be there. So we take too big of leaps. And when we do that, sometimes if we actually do take the action, right, we leap and we don't get all the way because it was too big. And then you fail, and then that adds to the fodder over here of like, oh, you see, why did I even try? Or because it's such a large leap. Let's say it's a chasm, you're trying to get across it, trying to do the Matrix move, right? You're like from one building, you're like, I can fly. And you don't really have the full trust in it yet. Then you're not going to jump. You're going to run up to the edge and be like, ah! But if instead it's like, you know what? I'm going to go down the door here and down this stairwell and then out on the street, and I'm going to start walking across the street, and I'm going to go back up on the other building. Many steps might have to be taken, but you made it. Right? So I think this is one of the biggest reasons, is we try to take too big of a step. The other reason is that we're paralyzed in our own lack of safety. That we're paralyzed in our own lack of safety. If you've been living in survival state for a long time, which means your nervous system has been in an anxious trigger, it's been waiting for danger and is constantly aware and trying to react to it, then it doesn't want you changing anything. It's like, look, we've got our armor, we've got our comfort zone. Why are you trying to change things? Don't open that door. So we have to actually first come into safety within, right? And this is on 3 different levels: emotionally, mentally, and physically. This is a lot of the work that I do at my healing center. It's for the nervous system. It's for anxiety and things like that. And so I get to work a lot with people trying to find safety. And one of the first things is to realize nothing is broken, nothing is wrong. That's what we were talking about earlier. Because if you do that and you come to your nervous system, you're like, you have to change. You're not enough. You're broken. Nervous system's like, wait, you're trying to change? No! And it gets more armor up. But rather it has to be an action of curiosity without agenda. You're not trying to change anything, you're trying to find clarity. And when you do that, then you come back to your senses, your sensations, the feeling state of your actual embodiment, and you begin a new relationship with this physicality. The nervous system relaxes. As that happens, you move from that mental state of the amygdala and survival state towards the frontal cortex of imagination and problem solving and creative thinking. And when you start to have that and you start to see, ooh, there is potential and possibility, and you start going towards it, you get so happy, you start to cry. And that's emotion. And all of a sudden, you're noticing the safety of all these different states. When you allow yourself to express, when you allow yourself to come back to your physical senses, and in that, you automatically start to move the mind into a focus of where you want to go instead of what you've been avoiding. Yeah. So safety and small steps, that would be the answer. So coming back a little bit more to this topic today of reigniting the magic. A big piece of that really is to realize that there is possibility outside of your knowledge. Because when we look at magic, we define magic as that which we don't know how it happened, right? The ancient people, they would look up at the stars and they'd see a shooting star and they'd be like, oh, magic. Or the sun would come up and down, they're like, oh, magic. They just didn't understand how it was working, right? And there's still a lot of things in our lives that we don't know how it works, but instead of approaching it like, oh, how amazing, this magic of the unknown, we're like, the unknown? I don't like the unknown. I like to know everything. I want to have everything under control. There's this little space that's right here in the present moment, in between that past moment and the future possibilities, and that's the unknown. See, here's all familiar. You've lived through it. You know what's there, kind of. Technically, our memories, never really on par. We're not really 100% certain about that stuff. We're making up a lot. But it's familiar. And so we're like, I think I know this, and I'm taking that and projecting it as a possibility over there. This little area here, don't know what's going on. And so to move, to shift that focus, to go from the past to the future, you make this like Michael Jackson move. You're like, hee hee. But instead you get stuck here. You don't make it past that present moment because it's unknown and you get scared. And so you're like, okay, I'm going to, woo! No, I'll just go back to familiar. Everything's fine. I'll just stay in my patterns. It's not worth it. But I'm inviting you that if you embrace those 3 words, I don't know, a magical thing will happen immediately. You can find out. When you embrace I don't know, when you admit it to yourself, when you accept, oh, about that, I don't know, you give yourself the opportunity then to go find out. But when you're fighting it, resisting it, what you're doing is you fill it in with a story. Right? What if I did quit my job and go for some other job, but I don't know if that's going to happen? And the mind's like, yeah, what if it doesn't happen? What if you end up on the street? What if you're homeless for the rest of your life? No, okay, I'll stay in my job. Move into, with curiosity, the unknown. But hedge your bets, right? Stack the deck. And the way that you do that, go in there with an intention going, I would like it to be like this. What I want in my life is this. And what happens is you orient yourself towards that. And as you orient yourself and you keep asking your mind, your psyche, your brain, you keep going, where can I find the way to get there? How can I have this be possible? How can I feel this way? How can I meet this person? How can I this? How can I that? And you're asking your mind like a Google search would be like, let me go find out. And it'll find out stuff. And sometimes, and this is again the magic of the mind, it just makes it up. So where there wasn't a possibility before, you create one. If that's not Harry Potter stuff, I don't know. Right? You can create the possibility, but only once you give it permission. Once you decide that it is possible for that, for you, and you start focusing on it. So reigniting the magic is really more about reorienting your focus. Starting to notice what it is that's possible in life, because I guarantee every single possible expression, interaction, sensation is available in every moment. It's like a cosmic jukebox or a vending machine, right? All you have to do is go up to it, select, put a little something into it. You have to invest your time, your energy, right? It's not just free. You may have to do some work, but the work is towards what you want. That work pays off. When you're working to get away from something, no payoff. You're not gaining anything. Make your selection and then trust that it's on its way. Imagine that you're literally playing some sport with your insecurities, right? They're the opposing team, and let's say it's soccer, okay? You've got the ball. This is the thing that you want. You already have it. It's in your possession. And you start kicking it, you're going, and you see doubt over here. You see fear over there. You see this person wanting to take it from you. And they're running all at you. Now, if you get scared and you freeze because of that, they already took it. Right? Or you're scared because maybe you were bullied as a child and they always took something. You're like, just take it, right? Because that's what most of the time we're doing. We're literally giving up our dreams. We're giving up what we want the moment we feel any fear internally. And the fear isn't of the thing, it's of the unknown. So instead, be like, I know exactly what it is. It's the opposing team. I'm not going to let them win. I want this. You've got a goal. You stay focused on the goal. Anybody who's played sports, especially things like soccer or football or basketball, there is a goal, and it's on the other side of the court. You have to get there. You're not going to get there by looking backwards. You're not going to get there by looking to see where the enemy opponents are. You're going to get there by staying focused on what you want. And as long as you're doing that, you'll weave, you'll bob, you'll skip over them, you'll do stuff, and you'll find your way there. And that's why it's fun, because you can literally, as a fear comes up, you're like, whoa, missed me, right? Don't be too serious about it in your own internal working, because if you're serious, your mind's like, wait, that's significant? We'll focus there. No. Make it insignificant. Make what you want significant. I actually intertwined the two methods there. So, yes. I hope that's helpful. So we're reigniting the magic of things, figuring out that magic is really just seeing the possibilities in our lives. That in every single moment there is an infinite possibility, and all you have to do is choose it. Now that doesn't mean that once you choose it, it's instantaneously yours. But it means that you have the potential in any moment to choose any outcome that you would like. And once you choose it, then you begin taking steps, baby steps, along that path. And I used the word earlier about compounding effects over time. What I mean by compounding, this is an amazing concept if you really get it. Compounding means that it's doubling all the time, right? A linear path means that it's like 1 plus 1 plus 1 plus 1 plus 1, right? Compounding means that you double the distance each time of something. So let's say, for instance, if I take 30 linear steps to that door, I made it to the door. If I take 30 compounding steps towards that door, I will go around the earth about 3 or 4 times. And that's actual statistics. There's a ridiculous expansion that happens when you realize things are building on each other. So when you're taking those baby steps, it's not like you're just taking one step at a time towards something. It's not flat. It's like a stairwell. So you take first step, it gets you this high. When you take the next step, you're double as high. When you take the next step, you're 3 times, 4 times as high. This is where compounding happens. You can get much further than you ever thought, but you have to stay focused on where you're going. That's probably mathematically one of the magical things in our lives, is that stuff just starts to happen. I'll give it to you in an even different way. Everything in life is a curve. It's either going up or it's going down. Up means it's going towards what you want. Down means that unconsciously it's most likely going away from what you want. That might be that you hit the snooze bar every single morning because you're too tired, but you have these dreams and you're just not achieving them. You're going down and away from what you want. You get up every morning at 6:30, you're on it, you start working, you start doing something, you have a habit and patterns and rituals that you do consistently, you're going to be moving towards. But it's not just like this, it's like this. At some point, there's always an inflection point where all that cultivation that you've done builds upon itself and then explodes forward. Think of it like when you're going to the gym. When you first start to go, you might be like, the 5K weights, and you're like, whoo. And then you're thinking, I'm never going to get up to 100K. But let's say you do that 5K for the next month. And then it's too easy after that. You're like, well, I built some muscle. That 5K is too easy. So then you go to a 10K. And then that 10K, in 2 weeks, you're ready to go to 20K. And then in 1 week, you're ready to the 50K because you're working with larger weight, faster progress. You see how the compounding effect happens? But the main thing is that consistency. Magic happens because we become consistent. It helps orient the mind, and it helps compound the effect. Especially if there is a strong and I'll call it discomfort or condition, right? Yes, it's going to make it harder to stay focused on what you're going towards and to stay consistent. Because there's going to be moments of major doubt when those pains come back, when those things happen, right? I use the example of myself. About 4 or 5 years ago, my back went out terribly. For 2.5 months, I was on the ground, couldn't do anything. Christina had to do everything for me. And it was the vertebrae were pinching my spinal nerve, right? And I went through the same idea going from being very active and playing capoeira and yoga and dancing and all these things to, I can't move. I was terrified. And I had to start contemplating, is this how it's going to be? 2 things had to happen. 1, I had to accept that that was a possibility and surrender to it. Because when I wasn't surrendering, I was resisting reality. And I was spending all my energy on the resistance. So the first step was to surrender. It doesn't mean to surrender and be like, I guess that's it. It means just stop fighting where you're at. Long enough that you can start to dedicate energy towards where you want to be. Once I did that, then I began. And I did what I think most people do. I made too big of a leap. I was like, okay, I'm going to just get back out there. I'm going to dance. And I would go and I would start dancing. I'd play some capoeira on the dance floor. I'd come back. I'd be like, I can't move again. Oh, Jesus. I had to discipline myself to take baby steps. And to trust that at some point, it would be different. But if there's a chronic condition, and chronic doesn't mean forever. Chronic means that it's been happening for a long time, which also means that before you were feeling the symptoms of it, it was building up for an even longer time, which means it might take some time to build away from that conditioning towards a new one. When you realize that, then you employ hope in the magic of life with consistency and focus and discipline. And you stay on the goal. Even when pains come back, you go, okay, I'm still here. The pain didn't take you down, your attention to it does. How do you find that clarity? Once, let's say you've let go of what was mucking things up and distractions, and you've got an idea of the direction you want to go, but you're just not really sure which path, what is it you want out of it, right? Well, first off, again, we know what we end up wanting is a feeling. So that already gives clarity. You can just say, I want a feeling. Now, the question might be, how do I want to get to that feeling? So two things are going to happen with that. One, you can start playing around and testing things and see, does it give me that feeling or not? And if not, no worries. That cleared it out. Next thing, keep going. Right? But when we compare, then we tend to distract ourselves from our own personal goal. And we might see, oh, they seem to be really having fun with that and enjoying that. Maybe I should do that. When it was never a calling in the first place, right? Or everybody says I should be doing this, or maybe I should do that. And the same when it comes to a condition of the body. We're looking around and we're going, oh, everybody else is doing fine, or that person's recovered. Why have I not? We compare, we hurt ourselves. Don't worry about their journey. You're on yours. The other piece of it in finding that clarity is sometimes to do nothing. This is a huge piece, and I think one of the biggest reasons people come to Bali. And it's funny to me, because people come here and they're like, I was burnt out, I was working too hard, I was too active, I came to rest. Great, what have you been doing? I got a 30 class pass, and I've been doing every single... right? Right? We go full on, instead of really allowing ourselves that moment to rest. Because when you actually rest, and you stop the urgency of trying to get away from something, in a rush to get somewhere else, what you do, it's like that jar, right? You have that jar, you've got some liquid in it, and you have some dirt. As long as it's moving, it's unclear. If you just stop for a while, it naturally settles, and you find clarity. Then take the steps. And I'll add to that a statistic, or really just kind of like an idea that's out there. In our moments of rest is when we integrate and grow the most. In our moments of rest is when we integrate and grow the most. I remember years back when I was in the military, special ops for 6 years, and when I went to my basic training, went through all of it, there's nonstop. There's no rest in that, right? And so for about 10, 11 weeks, we were just going. And I didn't notice too much physical change. I was like, well, this is ridiculous. I'm working out like crazy. How can this not be? And then I had 2 weeks off before going to the next level of training. It was a holiday time. Over those 2 weeks, I was like, right? Something happened in the rest time. Because physically, mentally, and emotionally, when we give ourselves a container of safe space where we're not assaulting, attacking, or activating our systems, then our body goes, oh, okay, I can integrate what you've done. We can grow now. We can do something with it. So if the conditioning of your past has caused you to get to a point where you're unclear about your future, wonderful, take a moment. Pause and just wait with curiosity. And it might take a while. I've seen people be on hiatus and other things for a year. But most of the time, it's only because they were resisting the real wait. They were in a rush to get to the next thing. Be 100% curious, patient, and okay where you're at. And you'll notice that clarity will appear. You're welcome. With that, I'm going to summarize what we've been talking about today as we're coming to the end of the hour here. We've been talking about reigniting the magic of life, of ourselves, of our interactions with others. And to reignite simply means to give yourself both permission and action in consistency. To move in the direction of what you truly dream of and what you really want for yourself. The feelings that you wish to feel. The sensations and experiences you want. The people you want to connect with. Move towards it with a consistency. Shift from that focus of what was familiar and of the past through the unknown towards what you want. And allow yourself that grace of actually taking small steps instead of trying to make large leaps. Because as you do, there is a magic that will happen in your mind, in your emotions and heart, and in your physicality. And it's this compounding effect that it consistently builds the significance of those things, the capability of those things, and suddenly you're making larger strides. I like the way that you said it, that your nervous system starts to stretch a little bit more each time. It allows a little bit more safety within each of those steps, more confidence. Because you knew you made it here, well, maybe you can make it more. And as you do that and you move more and more towards things, all of a sudden what happens is that the world opens up in possibilities and opportunities. And that's when you start just thinking to yourself, wow, this is magical. I went out today and this just happened and then that happened and it all was in line with what I really want. I don't know how the magic's happening because you were looking for it. That's how. So bring your focus to what you want. Thank you, everybody.